So, Ferguson, we talked about it a lot. Every officer I've talked to about that, it's been a teachable moment for law enforcement. Now, unfortunately, in places like Chicago, where politics rules everything, that lesson has not been learned properly. But there are folks trying to teach it properly about what you do in a case that very quickly gets out of control. We're joined right now by Ron Barber. Ron is the president of In the Line of Duty, but he's also a longtime broadcaster in the St. Louis area, former television and radio personality. Ron, how are you?
Personality, I don't know whether I go that far. Hey, Mark, I've got my cell. Can I be the eighth caller? What was that number?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we're at 314-969.
So I'm not eliminated.
How have you been, Ron?
Oh, doing well, other than the fact I had to parachute jump into this joint today.
It's a little crowded out there in the parking lot.
Oh, my God. But I'll tell you what, anything that puts me within a 9-iron chip shot of Landry's seafood
there you go.
Is fine and dandy with me.
They're going to appreciate that pitch, too, because they're just right down here at Union Station. I tell you, part of the thing is they've got that Christmas deal set up at Union Station with the ice skating rink and all that stuff going on, and we kind of share a parking lot here with them, so that might have had something to do with it.
Well, all I know is I had to walk around the trains, and by the time I got here, it was...
Well, we got you your exercise today,
yes,
Ron.
sir.
How about that? Yeah, absolutely. So I have enjoyed your video that you got to shoot with Chief Belmar, St. Louis County. So many officers have had their careers impacted by what happened in Ferguson. I mean, it was sort of the moment that changed the attitude of a lot of Americans about policing in this country, largely on a false narrative. And there's been so much misinformation that came out of people's perceptions of how that situation was handled by St. Louis County Police. That's kind of what I focus on whenever I talk to these police officers, whether it's former Chief Fitch or whoever I've had on discussing these different issues. Tom Jackson from Ferguson, who's been in here, and of course he was in the middle of it. He said it was like the. Did you see the Star Trek, the new Star Trek movie?
I have not.
Oh, you've not. So in one of the Star Trek movies, what Captain Kirk has to do is they have to go in and they have to beat this computer program that's been designed to be unbeatable. And he said that's kind of what he felt like after Ferguson kind of got out of control so quickly that getting back ahead of it was almost impossible. So I may be wrong, but as I look at this training video that you've helped put together with Chief Belmar, this is designed for police departments to think this through really well before it gets to a point where it's out of control. Liz, let me have you roll the first part of this video, if you don't mind, where it kind of addresses that.
This special edition, In the Line of Duty. A traffic stop in a St. Louis suburb sends shockwaves throughout the country and puts the name Ferguson on the tip of the nation's tongue.
If you don't believe it can happen to you, you're wrong. It can happen to you, and you need to understand that.
That, of course, Chief Belmar in your video there. His reaction is exactly what I heard from Tom Jackson. It could happen in any police department in America.
Well, I think what he said in regard to many things on this video, law enforcement will find invaluable. But Mark, to me, the one comment that he made that I wanted to make sure that I pass along was his statement that if you only experienced this on TV, you have absolutely no idea what happened.
Right.
You know, and here's a veteran officer, and I tell you, Belmar is a darn good man. He's a good chief. He's a solid cop. We're lucky to have him. And he told me flat out that in 28 years, as a law enforcement officer, from patrol all the way up to top dog, he had no idea how this was going to expand and explode. And that is why I felt that it was incumbent upon us as a company that tries to provide, invaluable training and education to law enforcement nationwide, incumbent upon us to make this happen. This training video covers what I consider to be the seminal incident in 21st century law enforcement. You cannot go anywhere in the country and mention the name Ferguson in a law enforcement venue, and the coppers aren't aware of it.
It's become an adjective.
It's become even more familiar, sad to say, in some ways than St. Louis itself. You know, there will be people who say, well, St. Louis, isn't that got the big arch or what have you? Yeah. But if you mention Ferguson, what is going to come to their mind immediately? Chaos, rioting, a true horror story.
Buildings burning.
But as Belmar said, and if you look at history, he said, Ron, we didn't fire a shot. We didn't fire a shot. They had Molotov cocktails, which is absolutely cause for use of lethal force, being tossed at them. Bags of feces, urine, rocks, gunfire going off. And they were able to maintain their cool to the point they never fired a shot. Now, if you look back in riot history in the United States, you go back to Detroit in '67. I remember it well. They were shooting rioters to death on sight in Detroit. And here again, not a shot was fired. And Mark, look at all the crap that they were taking for the use of the armored vehicles and using the snipers, using the tear gas. Well, you know, what do people want them to do? If they didn't use tear gas, then what are we looking at? Lethal force.
That's the next step.
You know,
sure.
So a few innocents and, a few CNN reporters from back in New Haven get gassed. So what? Lethal force was left on the table. They used the snipers mostly, Mark, because they have these extremely powerful telescopic sights. They weren't zeroing in on crowds willy-nilly. They were, in numerous instances, zeroing in on people. In one case, a fellow who had a gun was brandishing a gun. In another case, a car had come racing up to the front lines at a diagonal, doors open, two guys get out and slink beneath the doors. The telescopic sights allowed them to do that.
Yeah,
and as far as the armored vehicles, I know that caused a lot of consternation, but hey, bottom line, let's say hypothetically, I don't know if you have youngsters. Let's say your 5-year-old daughter is being held hostage, and the gunman's demanding this, that, and the other. Now, you as a father or you as a mother, etc., are you going to decry the use of whatever it takes to get your daughter out of that situation?
Of course not.
Okay. So they're using the armored vehicles for what? For safety, for security. The coppers are able to stay behind it. They're not vulnerable.
That is a point that it gets overlooked in all of this, because that's what a lot of people nationwide are going to remember about Ferguson. The police overreacted. They were militarized. That was the story that was going around the national media. When in reality, as you mentioned, they never fired a shot. They were protecting our public servants with the use of shields in these vehicles, which is why shouldn't we? And that I'm glad you brought that up, because it doesn't get mentioned often enough. Now, before we run out of time, what is the message that Chief Belmar is giving in these videos to other departments? So if this happens in your town, here are 4 things you better do right away. Or is it like that? What's he telling them?
Among the top 4, but not number 1, is reach out. Always reach out. Prevention is the best possible cure. Constantly be reaching out to the community, staying in touch. But I feel from what he told me, the most critical thing for law enforcement is not to lose the narrative.
Right.
And when he said that, I said, well, what the hell is narrative? I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but I've since figured it out. Don't lose the narrative to the media. Don't lose the narrative to the loudmouths. Don't lose the narrative to those who can take the truth and fold, spindle, and mutilate it any way they choose. Get the narrative out, be truthful, be honest, but stay in touch with the people.
It's a great point. And, as I've talked to Chief Fitch and Chief Jackson and some of the others who were involved, they had it coming at them from both angles. They weren't getting the support they needed from the governor. The governor was in contact with the White House. There were strings being pulled that were beyond the control of some of the police who were supposed to be in charge of the situation. And that may be one of the most frustrating things. Ron Barber from In the Line of Duty, he's produced this video. Is there a place people can go online to look at some of these?
Sure, lineofduty.com.
Okay.
And do you have time for a 30-second story?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is, and you may be able to chew on this with your listeners. I'll tell you this little story. 40 years ago, when I first came to town, I was a reporter at Channel 2, and my main thing was the crime beat. And so I frequently found myself down at police headquarters, perp walks, and God knows what else going on.
Right.
So I walk into the homicide division one afternoon, and I look over I'll never forget, I look over my right shoulder, and there's this huge montage of faces, young black men. And I noticed that in almost all of these instances, there were X's through the faces. And I talked to one of the old homicide dicks there. I said, what is that all about? And he said, Ron, that's just another generation destroying themselves. All of these young men, all of them had been killed in mostly one-on-one shootings. Not police-involved shootings. I'll tell you, from the time I was there, I don't remember a single police. But here I'm looking up at this huge montage and all these faces that, Ron, they're just destroying another generation of themselves. And you know what? Some things haven't changed.
In 40 years. Yep, that's true. Ron Barber, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Appreciate looking at that video, and I hope people get a chance to check it out in thelineofduty.com. Is the thelineofduty.com? Did I get that right?
It's In the Line of Duty.
In thelineofduty.com. All right, good. A quick break.